When we're young, we have an amazing, positive outlook about how great life is going to be, but somewhere along the line, we forget to dream and end up settling. Join Up Dots features amazing people who refuse to give up and chose to go after their dreams. This is your blueprint for greatness. So here's your host, live from the back of his garden in the UK, David Ralph.
Yes, hello there. Hello, everybody out there listening to Join Up Dots. Welcome to episode 109. This is a Sunday evening and we're recording. And actually, we started the conversation last Sunday, but we had technical issues, as happens quite often. And our guest last week did everything he possibly could, even driving up into the mountains of LA or San Diego or somewhere. It was exotic anywhere. And sitting outside a golf club trying to get onto their Wi-Fi. Well, it failed us. So fortunately for us, he's come back again tonight and we're going to record another belter because I already know the conversation we're going to have because we touched on it last week. Today's guest is someone that I've wanted to have on the show for quite a while, not just from last week, but right from the very beginning of actually planning Join Up Dots. But due to him hitting his stride, travelling through South America and generally having a kick-ass life, I only get to speak to him now. But hey, doesn't that just add more dimensions to a life that is already perfect for a show like mine, I reckon? He's a man who is inspired to find the true definition of consciousness and how we can all become more conscious to build a better life for ourselves. He wants us to overcome the self-limiting fears that root us to the spot and instead focus on the go-getter mentality, which is the way to create the success that we all want. And of course, he is living. So how did he get to the point in his life when he realised that mindset was the key to everything? And how did he find travelling through the jungles of South America without Wi-Fi, Starbucks and all the other comforts that we rely on daily? And why did he feel the need to shave off all his hair recently? Well, let's find out as we bring onto the show to start joining up the dots of his life, the one, the only, Mr. Michael Jacobs. How are you, Michael?
I am doing fantastic, David. How are you?
I am very well, and you're booming big time tonight. Last week, it was like a small child shouting from a cupboard trying to hear you. It's it's one of those things that technology is so amazing when it works, but you almost kind of expect it always to work. So when it doesn't, it throws your life out somewhat.
Yeah, last Sunday was a little frustrating, but I'm glad we got back on it here, and we're rolling.
So last week you was recording, was it in the hills of LA, did you say?
Yeah, I was in the hills of San Diego, actually, out at this golf club, and you're not allowed to go in and use the internet inside the golf club, so I tried to sit in my car and perform the Skype call through the car, which obviously didn't work too well.
But it's just amazing, isn't it, that you could even try that?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm pretty inventive, David. I'm pretty creative, so I make it work if I can.
Have you always been creative? Can you look back on your life and you can kind of think of certain things where you've seen an angle to make things work that perhaps wasn't there for other people?
Yeah. I would definitely say that I've had a different sort of conscious look on the world ever since I was a kid. And really, honestly, David, the first really big part of my life, I would say the first 18, 19 years, which is funny to say because it's the majority of my life at this point. But the first 18 or 19 years, honestly, David, was a big battle for me. It was a big struggle in the aspects of really not understanding like why I was here on this planet, what I was doing, what anybody else was doing, and how we're all just running these continuous cycles. And honestly, I was pretty confused and ungrounded for the first 18, 19 years of life.
But aren't you supposed to be ungrounded at 18, 19? Aren't you supposed to just be sort of running around, drinking too much, having fun? That seems to be very aware that you're already having those questions, because I never had those questions at that age. I think I was just existing, I think.
Yeah, I think that's what society tells us that we need to be doing, or we quote unquote should be doing when we're 18 and 19 is going to college and having parties and all this fun stuff, which in no way, shape, or form am I putting down. But I also think that there's usually a deeper lying meaning behind the reasons why we participate in such things, David. And for me, I've always been very, very interested in just how people think. And it's not even really how people think, but a combination of how they think, how they act, how they feel, and how that creates their own personal reality. And for me, what I've really realized is the fact that usually when it's 18 to 19-year-olds that are drinking and having a great time, and it's all good and fun, but I think we have to be aware of the intention behind why we're doing those things. And if the intention there is to escape reality or in something along that lines, I think we have to be very aware and very conscious not to let it take us over. That makes sense.
It makes total sense. And it's funny, now, because I've been having these conversations all the time, my kind of logic on this has changed. If I had been having this conversation with you maybe 6 months to a year ago when I wasn't doing this job, I would have said to you, Michael, that's what you're supposed to do when you're 18 and 19. You're supposed to drink, you're supposed to have fun, you're supposed to pull girls, as we say in the United Kingdom, or pull boys if that's what you want, and just generally have a kind of mad time because you're young. Then it's time to settle down and, you've got the rest of your life to be responsible and serious. That's the kind of response I would have given you maybe 6 months to a year ago. Now I'm talking to entrepreneurs who are like 16 and are already going for their first million, or they're 4 years old and they've already created their first business. And I'm kind of caught between the two now. I kind of think to myself, is that what we should be doing? Should we be really focused on the future as youngsters, or should the future kind of take care of itself when it's right to take care of itself? So it's interesting you make that point, and I'm not sure where I sit at the moment, but I'm kind of leaning more towards you now.
Yeah, David, I love what you bring up there, and I the way that I always tell people is think about this. Usually, when you think that something needs to be a certain way, that at 18 or 19 you should be partying, or at 25 you should have a job and be married. If you think of any instance in your own experience where you say those things or you believe those things, I always tell people to say, or to really look at, where did that belief come from? Because usually, and I would guarantee you 99% of the time, that belief was not created by yourself, but was rather told to you. And over time, you began to just believe something that someone else told you was true, and you accepted it to be truth. And that's what I really like to teach people, is just to look at it in a different way, David, because I don't like to live in the perceptions or the limitations that other people tell me I should live in. And I just choose to open up and allow what needs to unfold.
It's funny, I sit here listening a lot to these conversations, obviously, because I have to respond. And a lot of the time when people are saying things to me, I'm actually reflecting on my own life. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I've had things in my life where I've benchmarked myself against things that I feel that I should have done at that age. For example, I used to remember thinking, God, if I'm still living with my parents at 25, I've done something wrong. And I remember thinking, God, if I haven't lost my virginity by the age of 30, and believe me, it wasn't 30, I'm not telling you when it was, but I've done something wrong again. And I had these time frames in my mind. And as you were saying that, I was thinking, you're absolutely right. Where did these dates come from? Where was I sort of like saying I should have moved out by the 25, I should have done this by 30 or whatever? It's just kind of socially out there, isn't it? We kind of pick up on this vibe of what's expected.
It's honestly, like, this is the things that I'm so passionate about, David. It's absurd to me how people are not recognizing these things. Because one, what it really begins with is just following what everybody tells you to do. And really the second major thing is the fact that you're just trying to compare yourself to something else. You're comparing yourself to how other people used to do it, or you're comparing yourself to the time frame in which other people used to do it. And to me, it's completely, absolutely absurd. And the reason for that, David, is the fact that you can't compare yourself to anyone. You can't, I can't, no one can. And the reason is the fact that we're so individual, we're so unique, and as humans, we spend our time so much trying to compare ourselves to others to see how we can be more like another person, how we can be better than another person, that we completely fail to see how beautiful we are as an individual, how unique we are as an individual, and how our personal skills, our personal heart can change the world.
I'm going to spin that just slightly, because once again I agree with what you're saying, but I'm going to spin it as well, because what is lunacy as well is if we're comparing ourselves to others and we're trying to be what others are, basically we're taking ourselves as individuals and putting ourselves where the greatest competition is, because everyone's doing the same thing. And that seems daft to me now, while we're not saying, I'm unique, I've got talents, I've got skills that will separate me from others. If I find my passion, I've created my own path where nobody else is on it, or very few people are on it. But by going, this is what I should be doing, that's what I should be doing, this is what's expected of me, I should go through college, university, get this, get a job, blah, 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 you're actually putting yourself in a bottleneck with everybody else.
Exactly. And not only that, David, but you're limiting everything. You're limiting your whole reality, your whole potential, everything about you. Because if you really think about it, we're born, right? And as soon as we're born, as soon as we gain some consciousness, we begin to believe that there's a hierarchy in this world, that there are other people that are better than us, that will always be better than us, and there's nothing that we can do about it. And as we begin to come older and older, and this belief begins to come more and more into our being, we become into this, what I call a box. Literally, people are living in this box of saying, well, I can't do that because I'm not good enough at this. I can't do that. I can't do this. I can't do that. And they forget to see the things that they can do. And in this whole I can't mentality, this whole negative down mentality, they've lost sight of what makes them purely special. And it's just being themselves.
When did you first get this vibe? Was it 18 or 19, or was it before? Do you remember a little Michael thinking, hang on, I'm thinking differently from other people here?
I remember that I was thinking my way as a kid. And what I mean by that is I remember specifically thinking about the ways that I thought reality worked. But then I constantly, as a child, was put down and not by my parents by any means. My parents always supported me, but just by society's perceptions in general, where I would say, "Oh, this is how I feel," and someone would say, "No, that's not how it is. This is how it is." And so I would always be constantly doubting myself, constantly doubting what really my heart was telling me. And David, the only shift that happened was at 18 or 19 when I went and I lived in India for 3 months. I figured out that my heart was right. And the thing that I had been doubting for the first 18, 19 years of my life was the thing that I needed to be following. And once I said, you know what, forget what everybody else has to say, I'm following my heart, everything changed.
Right, okay, so let's jump to that. So what made you go to India in the first place for 3 months? Were you finding yourself at that stage? Was it a course you were signed up to? What made you do it?
It was a mix of both, to be honest with you. I had this was a pretty big pivotal moment in my life. I had just been really beginning to discover what I had the ability to do in terms of manifestation and creation with my own mind. And really, I said that honestly, India just kind of came to me. I was in college at the time, and it was an opportunity to do a study abroad program for 3 months over there over the summer period. And it just kind of fell in my lap. The opportunity arose, and I said, India? Oh, I know nothing about India. The only thing that I know about India is my dad goes there maybe one or 2 days every couple years to deal with some business. I knew nothing about India at all. And I just said, let's do it. Let's figure it out. I really felt some innate calling, David, something that I continue to feel with each experience that I have. But really, this calling just came from my heart, and it said, let's go, let's do it. And it was just pulling me.
So you land in India, and tell us the story of how you've started to find yourself and find your path.
Well, honestly, it's difficult to pinpoint the exact moments when things change, and I think we can all recognize that because all of our experiences are just compiled into one giant life. But really, I think, David, what I would say in an observative mindset is when I stepped off that plane in India, I got onto a bus, and I was with my classmates, and we were all headed over to this establishment where we would be staying for the next couple weeks or couple months. And something really changed as I observed the way that the people were living, as I observed more of the culture. And the main point that I would like to make is I really observed the fact that these people were happy, David. They were so happy. Every single one of them was in such a joyous, loving mindset. but they didn't have all the things that we have as Americans. They didn't have clean water. They don't have abundance of food. They don't have abundance of money where they can just go and do X, Y, and Z. These people were living in some of the worst conditions that I had personally ever experienced at the time. And that really created a massive shift within me.
Well, why do you think they are? Because it's true, because I was reading something about what's the book called? Think Like a Freak, and Freakonomics, and they were saying that the poorest people on Earth actually have the lowest suicide rates. And I've mentioned this numerous times because when I was reading his book, I was laying in bed reading his book, and my wife was asleep by the side of me, and I felt like waking her up and saying, this is amazing. The more you have in life, actually, the unhappier you are, because then you've got something to compare against expectations. So if you're striving to make your first million, when you get your first million, you'll see people have got 10 million, and you think, that's where I should be. And you keep on going, and you're never satisfied because you're on that kind of hamster wheel going through. But the poorest people on Earth, they seem to just exist, and they just know that it's nurturing the family, supporting each other, and kind of getting through a day, and they don't have those larger expectations that then make them unhappy. It's fascinating.
It's extremely fascinating, David, and I love it. This is what I really want to talk about right now, because this is what drives me so much, is the fact that if you think about this, the basis of every single entrepreneurial venture, every single person wants to start a company or create something successful for one reason. They want to be happy. Now, they believe that X will make them happy, whether it's money, or Y, whether it's having a big company, or Z, whether it's getting a hot girl because you run some big company. You know, whatever they perceive that happiness to be, they believe that they will find it when they do something. And that's the problem, David, is the fact that we have separated ourselves from the present moment. We've separated ourselves from living right now. And we're constantly thinking about the next thing. You get to one point and you say, okay, I've achieved this, awesome, now what's next? And that's the problem, is we don't sit in the present moment. We don't say, wait a second, I'm thankful for everything that I have right now. I feel like I have mass abundance right now, and I'm thankful for that. And that's why people aren't happy, David, is because they're constantly looking in the future for happiness rather than finding the happiness that they already have right here, right now, in the present moment.
Because I think I'm one of the happiest people I know, but I don't celebrate very well. And so when I started this show off, it was something that I was striving towards. It's something that I wanted more than anything. And there were certain kind of targets I was aiming for. And once I hit those targets, I should have, yes, I've done it, and just reflected and thought, yes, I've achieved certain things. But I was like that, and I'm still like that. It's like I get to a certain amount of downloads and listeners, and I think, right, that's good, let's move on to the next one. And I find it hard to actually give myself a moment of celebration to appreciate what I've achieved. So it is a common problem wherever you are, even if you're unhappy or happy, because there's nothing bad in my life at all. I'm delighted every sort of single day, but I still have that striving against what I see other people doing.
Exactly. And the thing that the thing that's the most ironic thing, David, and the thing that makes me laugh as well as cry a little bit sometimes, is the fact that when you are truly living in the present moment, and when you can separate yourself from the need to always think about what's next or always compare to what's next, you're actually going to find so much more success than you could have ever imagined. Because when you're living in the present moment, you're not comparing yourself to anyone. You have no expectations of what's going to happen, and you're open towards any possibility happening. And when you have a combination of those three, David, you become this open-minded person that says, you know what? Whatever happens, happens. And usually when you are less stressed, less anxious, less any negative emotion, you're going to have a better outcome.
So do you not set goals or anything? Do you just see what happens and go for it?
That's a great question. Yeah, I really don't set goals anymore, David, actually. And it's a controversial thing to talk about for entrepreneurs a lot of the time is because everybody's like, okay, you always got to be setting goals. You always have to be setting goals. Now, I do set intentions. Don't get me wrong. I set intentions. For example, my book, I set an intention that it would become a bestseller, and it did so.
Let me just stop you there, Michael. So what, in your mind, what is the difference between a goal and an intention? To me, that sounds the same.
Yeah, I think that people get obsessed about goals, David. And I think that people write down a goal and then they sit and they look at that goal and they say, this is all I care about achieving is this goal, right? And I'll give you an example. Let's say I want to get my podcast at 20,000 views, right? That's your only goal. And so you focus and focus and focus and focus on that goal. And when you are able, but really when you set an intention, it's not about saying, this is exactly what I want, and if it doesn't happen this way, I'm not happy. When you set an intention, or specifically when I set an intention, I say something along the lines, while I was writing this book, I said, I would like to write a book that's going to provide value. You know? It doesn't have to be anything specific. I don't know what it's going to be about. I don't know how long it's going to be. I don't even know if it's going to sell a copy. But I just want to write a book that's going to add value, and that was my intention. If I had set a goal, I would have said, I want to set a book that's 101 pages that does this and this and this and this. And it would have been limited in that sense. So the reason that I set intentions is they're more broad, they're more open. It's a broader perspective. And the book manifested, maybe not in the way that I first expected it to, but it manifested better than I expected it to. And then I followed it up with saying the intention. I set the intention that I want to be a bestseller, right? And instead of saying I want to be a bestseller in one day in this category and I want to get 30 downloads a day, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I just said I'm open to whatever download count I'm supposed to get. Whoever is meant to read my book, I am open and I allow them to read it. And honestly, it manifested.
So are we talking about somebody who believes in the law of attraction? Is this what we're talking about, Michael?
Yeah, you could say it's the law of attraction. I think there's many different words that people put on it. And I think that people get turned off by saying the law of attraction because that's just one of billions of factors that are truly in the creation process. But yes, that is part of it.
It's funny, though, because I brought that up deliberately because so many people... I've read The Law of Attraction many times. I've watched the film The Secret and I've watched Beyond the Secret because I'm just kind of interested and fascinated. And I've read the book, Jack Canfield, maybe 5 or 6 times, just sort of once thoroughly, second time thoroughly, third time flick through it, and now I pick it up every now and again and look at it. And to me, it's not a secret at all. To me, it means, you focus on something and you vision what you want or visualize what you want and you work towards it. Simple as that. And you take action, and all those incremental gains lead you to somewhere that may not be what you was aiming for originally, just as you're saying, but ultimately it will be in the area. And if you do enough of those things, you will start coming in contact with other people that are doing similar things, and then kind of life becomes easier. That's my feeling on it. And a lot of people will shy against things like that, and they say, oh, it's woo-woo, and it's this and it's that, and I don't believe in all that rubbish. But it's just conscious intent, isn't it?
Yeah, the thing is, David, it just is. You know what I mean? And I think we talked about that the first time we talked. It doesn't need to be defined so much, because I think you can explain it from any perspective. You can explain it just as you did from the logical perspective, saying that, hey, you know what? I set it. A thought out there, and since I took action on that thought and continuous action, it eventually created into this, which I'm totally on board with as well. And then there's also the metaphysical perspective where you say, okay, thoughts are energy, I'm energy, everything's energy. So when I begin to give my energy towards something else, I begin to attract it, And I think people get turned off a lot of the times from the metaphysical perspective. Because people are usually really closed and have no idea what that even means. And I think it can be explained from both perspectives. But I think the matter of fact, David, that people don't get about the law of attraction or whatever you want to call it is the fact that it's always happening. it's happening right now. It's happening even if you don't choose to think a positive thought. If you choose to think a negative thought and you say, you know what, today's going to be a bad day, then it probably will be a bad day. It's not like the law of attraction just works for when you're saying positive things, but it works for when you're saying negative things, and it's always occurring.
It's true that, and I bet you, and I don't know this, I'm just speaking off the top of my head, but I bet you the majority of our listeners who are but the only reason they're listening to these shows is that they're looking for a better life. End of story. And so they're in jobs, they're in situations, they're in relationships that they don't like. And they will be listening to this, hearing us say, isn't life great? Isn't life brilliant? And after 150 episodes I've done, I've never had one guest who's told me how rubbish their life is at the moment. They've told me how bad it was at certain points of their life, but then how it improved due to them changing their mindset and moving on and progressing, and then everything gets better. And it seems simple to me and logical to me that if you are in a job out there and you're doing a job that you don't like, you are going to be negative about it. And the more negative you are, you almost want to create that victim. So you can say, I told you it was rubbish. See, that's why it always happens to me. Woe is my life, and all that kind of stuff, which you don't see generally with people who have changed their mindset and striving towards something better. So I do think a negative thought brings a negative thought, and a positive thought brings a positive thought. End of story.
Always, David, always. And I would even say the fact that, like, when really you're speaking about these negative things, and you're continuing to attract these negative things, and you're complaining about how bad your life is, you got to look at it and say, okay, maybe I take 5 days off from not complaining and see what this does, and see if there is an effect on my life. But most people are just so closed and so stuck within their own perceptions that they say, no, this is rubbish, this is woo-woo, I don't care, I don't want to listen to it. Give me something logical that I can understand that will make me successful. When really, if you talk with, I would say, the majority of quote-unquote successful people, they would say a lot of their success is dedicated to things that they can't even explain.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely. And the more successful that they are, I get stories when I say to them, doesn't that blow your mind? And they go, it blows my mind more than anything. And I say, well, how did that happen? I put myself in that position. And that's the only thing they can say. And they have huge leaps of faith and a huge increase in their wealth due to stuff that they can't actually pinpoint how it's happened. Well, I can pinpoint how it happened, and it's all those tiny little things that they were doing over a period of time suddenly has a kind of force to it, and it pushes you forward. I've seen it with me. Things are happening at the moment on the show, which as I was saying before recording, I was saying to you, God, things are really going with this show, and I'm not really sure why they're going, but I'm glad they are. I can't pinpoint it, but I can only pinpoint it now, really. It's because it's all the other things that I've done that have kind of added up. It's almost must be like a spring, that if you press down on a spring, press down, ultimately it's going to force back, and boing, off it's going to go. And if you're doing that kind of negative, it's going to spring back on you, and positive works the same way.
Exactly, David. Exactly. I couldn't agree with you more.
Oh, we're getting good at this, Michael, aren't we?
We are.
It's like we're two professionals coming together. So when somebody meets you, what do you actually say you do for a living? Because I don't think we've made it clear at the moment. So how do you define yourself?
That's such a great question. I really honestly have stopped answering those questions and stopped asking those questions, because I found that when you say something along the lines of, oh, what do you do for a living? That's just the general rhetoric question that you ask everyone. And you really don't care what I do for a living. You're just asking it to ask. And what I turn around and I usually say is, well, I'm passionate about, and I start to share what I'm passionate about, which is all of these things that I've been discussing. And also, really, David, I think it comes down to asking people what they're passionate about rather than asking them what they do. Because if you ask most, I hate saying average people because no person is average, but if we want to put it on a linear scale here, the average person, when you ask what they're passionate about, will be so surprised and so taken from that question that it'll actually shake their consciousness awake a little bit. Because the average person who has been living in their job, who has been doing a 9 to 5 for 20, 30 years, has forgotten and given up about what they're passionate about and what they care about a long time ago.
So what are you passionate about?
I'm passionate about everything we're talking about here, David. It's not something that I can put into a box. It's something that's really abstract. What I tell people is I say that I'm really passionate about consciousness. And I think that consciousness is a beautiful thing, David, because it's not a one aspect thing. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about it. And I'm actually having a couple realizations here while we're on this call. Consciousness can be put into any aspect, Dave, and that's the most beautiful thing. It can be put into health. It can be put into humanity. It can be put into entrepreneurship. It can be put into the whole concept of how our world is living on a conscious state. It can be divided and it can be multiplied, and it's still one thing. Does that kind of make sense, or is that a little bit too woo-woo?
It's slightly woo-woo. I'm interested in what the realizations were that you were having on this call. What's gone into your mind as you've been talking?
Yeah, I think that really what it comes down to is that when you are living in a conscious, like the way it's very hard for me sometimes, David, to put what's in my mind out of my words. That's why I do a lot of writing, because it's easier to write it down.
Yeah.
But I would say that really what it is the fact that, I'll give you an example here, right? When our world as a whole is living at a lower conscious level, we struggle more. For example, we fight each other more. We hoard what we think we own and we don't give to others. That's the state that our world's in right now, David. We're hoarding things. We're saying we want these. This is ours. We're not giving it away, and that's what causes poverty in the world. It's evident to see that the Western society is living a much more frivolous lifestyle than some other parts of the planet, and it makes me very sad to have to say that, and that's part of the reason why I chat about these things. But also you can take consciousness from another perspective. We can say it from the entrepreneurial perspective, David. If someone's in a lower state of consciousness as an entrepreneur, they're most likely, their first thought processes revolving around starting a business are with the intention to make money, or are with the intention to get a big house and a nice car, things like that, which I'm not putting down in any way. But I think that when you take entrepreneurship from a higher perspective and you say, what is this that I'm doing actually doing for the world? Why does it even matter? Why does in this mobile application, which is in a realization that I had, David, why does this small mobile application matter? And I realized that it wasn't making a big difference in the world for me, and that it was time for me to let it go and change my conscious perspective and move into a state where I want to do something that actually provides value for the world, that actually helps people.
But isn't that the clever way to do it? Isn't that what most entrepreneurs who are really successful do? They find the thing that provides the most value for the most people. Isn't that what Steve Jobs has done? Isn't that what, Warren Buffett, any of them? He finds...
100%, yeah.
He finds
exactly.
the true value that people will look at it and go, I want that. I want that in my life.
Exactly. And I think that there's something that I really need to make clear here. Those people that you just stated, really, I believe that they weren't looking for that. And what I mean by that is they weren't trying to create something. They weren't trying and putting a ton of effort in here. This is where the metaphysical side comes in. Is for example, someone like Steve Jobs is one of those people who failed, and even though he had success, he still got kicked out of his own company just so that he could have life realizations, and at the end of his life come back and say, I'm more humble now, let me create a product that's going to actually change the world. And he did. So I think it's very abstract, it's very hard to describe, but that's kind of how I feel about that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, let's play the words of Steve Jobs, because he left an amazing speech back in 2005. Obviously, he's not with us anymore, but his words are. So I'd be interested in your point of view of this. This is Steve Jobs.
Of course, it was impossible to connect the dots looking forward when I was in college, but it was very, very clear looking backwards 10 years later. Again, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart even when it leads you off the well-worn path, and that will make all the difference.
Those very last 3 words, that will make all the difference, or the last 4 words, actually gets me every time I listen to it.
Oh, that was beautiful, David. I've got chills right now. I love that. That is...
What is it that gets you with that, Michael? Because it gets me literally every time.
Honestly, it's just the truth, and it's something that we need to become. Like, this is why I teach this stuff, David, is because things like this are what draw me in. They're just what pull me in. And exactly what he says there, you have to trust. You have to trust in something. You don't know what you're trusting in. You have no idea what it actually is, but you just have to trust. And that's what I always tell everybody. It's all about having faith, David. And I think that people put it in there's a religious perspective of what faith is. There's this, there's that. But really what Steve Jobs is saying there is you just have to have faith, whether it's in God, whether it's in X, whether it's in Y, whether it's in Z, in whatever it is, whether it's faith in yourself, you just have to have faith. And I love how he says you cannot connect the dots while you're looking forward, but you can connect them when you're going back. And I've seen that perfectly example in my life. And I think that's something we all need to be aware of, because we're always so focused on, okay, I know this is going to happen next. I need this to happen next. When maybe that's not the next dot you're supposed to connect with.
As you're sitting there on Skype talking to me, are you really content with how your dots have lined up? Or are there any part of it that you think, oh, no, kind of took me off on a different direction. Maybe it's not where I would have wanted to be?
Oh, not at all. Not at all. The thing is, for my personal journey, David, like, it's when I look back and see the dots that have connected, it's just complete. I'm just completely thankful, and I'm completely in awe. Because really what's happened throughout my whole last, I would say, 4 or 5 years here is a complete transformation, a complete renewal of life. I feel like I'm actually living life. When the first 18 years of my life, I was a zombie to media and perception. And I think that a major thing that I want to say is that there's no regrets, David. And the reason that I say that is every single time I felt ashamed or I failed or something didn't go, quote unquote, my way, I learned from it. And that's a lesson that I will never, ever take back. And I will never, ever regret anything that happened to me, because in each and every second of your life, you have lessons that are being taught to you. And you can either become aware of them, or you can say, I'm embarrassed by this. I don't want to think about it.
Now, I ask this question to every guest, really, whether they have a big dot in their life that they look back on and they go, yes, that was it. Now, yours sounds like it was India, but for many of the guests, their big dot is normally the blackest part of their life, the part where they've actually been at rock bottom and they've realised it was their responsibility to take action, and it was their responsibility to actually create their own reality, and everything moved from that point. Do you have a similar dot in your life?
I think I have multiple dots like that, David. I think there's multiple points where I could say, wow, I've felt in a really, really bad place. I've been in a really, really bad place, and it's time to just say, forget it. I don't need this anymore.
Like what? Give us an example of a place where you had that realization of you've got to take action.
Okay. I think that one of the points was in India, David. It was actually, no, I'm going to give you a better one, David. It was actually before India here, and this is a really good one. I believe it was actually, if I don't quote me on this, but I believe it was December 25th, 2011. No, excuse me, December 31st, 2011. It was the day before New Year's on 2012, and I was sitting outside, and I was in my backyard, and at this point, I was a college student with really average grades, with trying to get into a business school because my parents had told me to go to business school, because my parents had told me to go to college, and all of this stuff. Really having no idea what life was about. And I remember just sitting out there and just like crying for a little while. And I was crying because I didn't think I was going to get into business school, and because of my grades at the time. And I had, the whole reason I had gone to the college that I had gone to was for business school. And I just sat out there and said, what am I doing with my life? And I literally asked myself that, David. That was the question I asked myself. I said, what the hell am I doing with my life? And I sat there and I cried for probably an hour. And after that, all I can say, it's going to sound metaphysical, it's going to sound woo-woo, but honestly, all I can say is something deep inside of me changed. I felt it. I knew instantly as soon as I left that moment of crying, as I stepped back into that house seconds later, I knew something had changed. I didn't know what. I didn't know what dots were going to be connected after that, but I knew. I felt it down so deep, and I've never been able to shake that feeling.
Isn't that just pure mindset? Isn't that when, you know, the boxer gets knocked on the floor for the 6th time, but then something thinks, right, that's the last time I'm being knocked down, and up he gets and he starts swinging and fighting back. Do we not all have that?
Oh, 100% we all have that, David. And I think that we all have it. And it's sad to me because I think that some people have forgotten that they have that. But yes, 100% we all have it. And I think it, even to add on to it, David, I think it's mindset to begin with, no question. But I think that I truly, truly believe that there's something deeper in there that I struck. Whether you want to call it a spirit, my soul, whether you want to call it my subconscious mind, whatever perspective you want to take from it, I hit something down there really, really deep that night, which caused it to arise and transform my entire being, my entire reality.
It's so fascinating that here you're earning a living, but you can't really define it to us. It's amazing that you have been on this path at quite a young age, because how old are you now, Michael?
22. I just turned 22 in May.
No, 22. And, you know, I can't help but doing this. I benchmark myself against where I am. I'm 44. And I wouldn't have had the realization or the awareness in any shape or form at 22. I was just kind of existing. I was going to work, earning some money, having a few beers in the evening, coming home, maybe going to the movies on the weekend, and I was just on that sort of treadmill. And do you see people in your vicinity, your peer group, that are very similar to you, or are you slightly different from most people? You said the very first thing that you said on this whole show was that you always have had a different way of thinking. And is that becoming more evident as you are progressing into sort of adulthood? Do you see people that aren't really on your wavelength all the time now?
More and more, David. And it's hard because part of me, part of me saying that is completely from the ego and saying like, and the ego wants to say, oh, I know something more than everybody else does, and I'm just on a different level. And that's just all ego talking, and I know that. But I also believe that it is a different state of awareness, and I'm thankful for the state of awareness that I've reached. But I also believe that each and every person has that state of awareness within them, David, and that's where I'm humbled every single time, whether they are conscious of it or not. We all understand these concepts that we've had this conversation about, and we all have them deep within our hearts. And if we just open up to them, I believe that every single person can find it.
Because every single person, I would say, would want success. Every single person would want more money. Every person wants better holidays, a nicer house, all that kind of stuff. I think that's just, even though we're programmed to think that way, I think, you know, I put my hand up and say, yes, I would like more money. I would like to fly first class. I would like all those kind of things. But so many people don't believe that they can have it. And I think that is the sort of real nuts and bolts of this conversation. You believe that you can have it, so you're more likely to get it. Other people believe that they're not going to get it, so they're never going to get it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it comes down to straight up just to conditioning. Because I think one of the things you asked me, David, was, have you always been this unique? You know, has this always been your thought process? And I think that everybody's always that unique. But because of programming, because of conditioning, because of these layers that we put upon ourselves, we've lost connection with that uniqueness. And truly, all it takes to be quote-unquote successful, whatever you want, whether it's a big car, a big house, whether it's just more happiness, really all that matters is connecting with that person, that deeper person that's inside of you, that person that you were born as, that you were always meant to be, but that society and that other people convinced you that you weren't somewhere in life. And it's time to wake that person up again.
Let's play a little speech. This is Jim Carrey, and he said this recently, and I absolutely adore this, and it's a real good point to play at this point of the conversation. This is Jim Carrey.
My father could have been a great comedian, but he didn't believe that that was possible for him. And so he made a conservative choice. Instead, he got a safe job as an accountant. And when I was 12 years old, he was let go from that safe job. And our family had to do whatever we could to survive. I learned many great lessons from my father, not the least of which was that you can fail at what you don't want. So you might as well take a chance on doing what you love.
That is just brilliant, isn't it? I love that.
Absolutely brilliant. That's beautiful. I love Jim Carrey.
The thing that strikes me with such power on that is it's down to you. It's just down to you. I was talking to a chap the other day, and I've probably mentioned him on 4 or 5 shows since I've done the interview with him, because he was just so inspiring. And he's a chap called Houston Gunn, and he's a 16-year-old in America, and he's aiming to be a millionaire by the time he leaves college. And he has 2 points of view. And when you hear a 16-year-old tell you this, you kind of think, yes. Number one is, why not me? Simple as that. When he looks at anyone who's successful, anyone who's got what he wants, he thinks, why not me? They're no different. They've just taken choices. And the other thing, he looks for no's. He goes for no's, and he believes if he gets enough no's out of the way, he will get a yes, and that yes will then push him on. So what I mean by that is he doesn't just go, oh, it's never going to work. He kind of knows it's not going to work, but he will send out 100 letters to people, and if he doesn't get a response, he sends out another 100, and then he sends out another 100, and he just keeps on doing it. Then he gets his one yes, and the one yeses that he's been getting have been amazing. You know, conversations with Donald Trump, interviews with Dave Ramsey, things that you kind of go, that's not going to happen in your mind. He knows it's not going to happen, but he knows by forcing it through, it's more likely to happen.
See, and I would even take it a step further, David, and I would say that if he changes his mindset to believe that it will happen, it will occur even more often than it is currently happening.
Simple as that, you think?
Yeah, that's my perspective on it. I believe that the energy that he sends out when he says, I don't believe it's going to happen, is the reason that 90% of them aren't happening.
I'll tell you a little story. Last night, I gave myself a night off. And at the moment, I'm working pretty much 7 days a week, 24/7, doing this show, because it does take a lot of time. And last night I said to my wife, I'm not going to do anything tonight. I'm not going to do any recording. I'm just going to sit there watching telly. And while I'm doing the show, as I'm doing it now, and I'm getting infused by it, and I'm passionate about it, I just think to myself, this is going to become the biggest thing ever. And so many people have told me it's going to be the biggest thing ever, because they say to me, what I'm doing is I'm projecting hope. And I'm allowing people to realise that there's a better life. And, you know, I'm providing value to people. And it's marvellous to hear that. And I buy into it and I think, great. Last night I was sitting there watching the telly with my wife. And all the time I was watching these programmes and my mind was going, it's never going to work. It's never going to work. It doesn't matter what you've achieved so far. It's going to suddenly die. What's the point in doing it? And I just had these sort of self-limiting thoughts crashing through me. And it really doesn't make sense why I was doing that last night, because ultimately I've done everything I possibly can to get the show up and running. And the show is up and running. It's going, you know, it's going better than I could possibly hope for. So even though you say, you know, if you have a positive mindset and you focus in on it, it's more likely to happen. Every now and again you have these cracks, and these cracks kind of overtake you, and it's like being an alcoholic suddenly, and you're on the wagon and then suddenly you fall off. So these negative thoughts are around us all the time. How do you think that I can overcome it so that I don't get as many of those, and somebody who hasn't even taken that first step can break free from that it's never going to happen, it's all right for somebody else kind of thought?
You know, David, I think that is a beautiful question, and I want to answer it a couple different ways. I think the first thing that I want to say is that we all have those moments. I don't want anybody to think that all of a sudden, like, I'm the most positive person in the world and all I do is positivity. No, definitely not. For example, this weekend, Friday and Saturday, I was having a horrible time. There was a lot of subconscious energy, thought processes that I was not willing to accept, which caused me more and more fighting and more intensity and anger and negative emotions that you don't want to experience. And I think that the first thing that really that I want to point on is positive thinking is not about eliminating negative thinking. I think that's what a lot of people think is they think that, okay, as soon as a negative thought comes into my mind, I need to say, get out, get out, get out. No, only positivity. And that's really not true, David. Really what it comes down to is learning why you're thinking those negative thoughts. So next time you have a thought of doubt or a thought of fear saying, hey, maybe this won't do as well as I thought, instead of saying, no, it will do well, and trying to affirm yourself over that negative thought, what I personally do is I say, why did that thought come? And I like to accept the thought. I like to say, no, that thought is a part of me. I thought it. I was the one that created it. Now, why did I create it, and what can I learn from it? And when you're able to do that, you're able to see life at a broader perspective, David, because most people, when they have a negative thought, they try to fight it. And fighting the negative thought causes more and more tension, more and more anxiety, which eventually results in just more negative thinking. And if you're able to take each negative thought that you have and just say, okay, I accept you. I accept that I thought this. I'm going to take responsibility for it. Now, why did I think it? Like, why did I do it? And it's the same thing as, like, think about this, Dave. It's the same thing as, like, you're raising a child, right? You're going to say, okay, think about why you did this and figure it out and get to the point of it. Now, it's just the same idea, only working with your own mind.
But I don't know if I would have been able to answer that last night. You know, I did exactly what you said. I fought it, and I thought, nope, that's not going to happen. I'm going to get back on there, and I'm going to, force my way through these doubts that I suddenly had. And there was no reason why I was having those doubts. It just happened. But I think if I'd asked those questions, why am I thinking that? I'm not sure I could have answered that. I think it was just kind of there. It was just in me.
And that's the whole point about diving deeper into the subconscious, David, is the fact that your conscious mind won't answer. And if it does, it's probably wrong. It's probably from a place of the ego. And what I mean by that is when you ask yourself a question, sometimes the answer won't come immediately. Sometimes it will come later. And this is all getting into the intuition and the trust that we discussed later. But I'll give you a great example here, David. And it's even along the lines of manifestation. I'll say, for example, if I have a negative thought and it comes into my mind and it says, for example, which it did on Friday about my ebook, and it said, I was thinking, hey, maybe I should increase the price to $3.99, see how that does. And then I go check my Amazon account and my mind starts running like, oh no, it's going to drop. It's going to drop the continuous sales. You're at a steady point right now, Michael. Just keep it there. Don't test it. Don't mess it up, And I began to fight those thoughts until I realized that I was fighting it. And I said, wait a second. Why did I think that? And what's causing this obvious insecurity in me, in my misbelief that I don't believe that I can raise my price $1? Like, what is that insecurity? And it didn't come to me Friday night. It didn't come to me all day Saturday. And it came to me Saturday night as I laid in bed. And it showed me the fact that I was really just separated from myself, that I didn't have faith in myself, that I didn't believe in myself, and that my own personal insecurities revolving around some past issues and past conditioning is what I like to call it, led to my negative thinking on Friday. But it didn't happen. My answer didn't come till Saturday night, but I was okay with that because I accepted it and I said, this was the lesson I was meant to learn. This is the time I was meant to learn it in, and it's all right.
Because I think, although I want the show to be uber successful, I think there's a little bit of me, and I'm being really honest here, I think there's a little bit of me that is kind of scared of what might come from the success, which to me doesn't make sense. Even though I'm saying those words, I think that's what I'm thinking somewhere deep inside me. It's like I can almost bail out at this moment, but once it gets to a certain point, then people are relying on me to produce this content 7 days a week, and it's slightly scary to think that I can keep doing it and keep providing what people want. There you go, Michael. I think I've just answered my question.
There you go. Exactly. That's exactly it, and I guarantee you that the more you dive into it, there's even going to be more reasons. And that's the crazy thing, David, is we like to think that all of our issues can be solved by one thing, right? That there's just one solution, and if we just had that one solution, our life would be perfect and we would have everything and it would just be fantastic. But we got to realize that every single person's life has ups and downs. Every single person's life has negative and positives. Every single person experiences the flow of life, which is the ups and downs, the ups and downs. The people that are happy, the people that are, whatever you want to call it, quote unquote, successful, are the ones that have been able to learn from the flows in life, to learn from the downs so that they can get the ups a little bit higher up there. And so that when they do dip it back down next time, it's not so low.
I agree with that.
Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, well, no, it makes total sense. It makes total sense, yeah. So where are you now? Not location-wise, but where are you now on your great path? Have you got things that you're aiming for? Have you got intentions that you're aiming for? What's in Michael Jacobs' plan?
I like how you changed that right there. Yeah, David, I've got some really intentions, just honestly to continue spreading what I love to do. I think I've become closer to my purpose after this last Costa Rica journey, and I think a lot of it revolves around writing. So right now I'm kind of just headed down the path of doing some writing, and I've released an ebook, I think it was 4 or 5 weeks ago, that became a #1 bestseller in 6 different categories. And I've got another one coming out next week, so we'll see how it flows. But I'm thankful for the message that I'm sharing, and I'm super thankful for everybody that's listening and continues to support.
Well, just before we let you go, Michael, I want to send you back in time, and this is part of the show we call a sermon on the mic, and this is when I play the theme tune, and as it's playing, you're transported back in time. And if you could go back in time and meet the young Michael, what would you say to him, and what age would you choose to share your advice with? So you're up, it's a sermon on the mic.
Here we go with the best bit of the show, the sermon on the mic, the sermon on the mic.
Younger Michael, I have one lesson to share and one thought to say, and really, it's just to let go, just to have faith, just to not stress so much, not worry so much about where you think you're going to be or when you think you're going to get there, but just enjoy the present moment. Enjoy exactly what life is giving you right now, and you'll get there in due time.
So, Michael, how can our listeners connect with you?
Awesome, David. Well, they can connect with me first on social media at facebook.com/MrJacobs21 or twitter.com/MrJacobs21. Those are the same handles for both of those websites. Or you can connect with me on my website at michaelaustinjacobs.com.
Thank you so much for spending time with us today, joining up those dots of your life, Michael. And please come back again when you have more dots to join up, because I do believe that by joining up the dots and connecting our pasts is the best way to build our futures. Michael Jacobs, thank you so much.
Thank you, David.
David doesn't want you to become a faded version of the brilliant self you were once to become. So he's put together an amazing guide for you called the 8 Pieces of Advice that every successful entrepreneur practices, including the 2 that changed his life. Head over to joinupdots.com to download this amazing guide for free, and we'll see you tomorrow on Join Up Dots.